I was not one to be believed in such things such as ghosts. However, I was still an individual that was easily scared. My friends Mike and Chris would consider taking it upon themselves to scare me, schemes such as jumping me from behind or telling me some scary story. This pointless act did scare me, but at the end of the day, they were pranks. Amongst the stories of pranks they pulled, nothing stuck with me more than what I saw on the 3rd floor. Through my high school years, I went to a really old-fashioned school. The school at the time had 2 complexes on the campus. The one on the right side was a newer building, which was where most of the few classes were held. On the other side was the original 3-floor complex, which was there from around the 1930s. We only had 2 classes there, and the school's shitty budget couldn't even have all the students pile in one area. They used the downstairs in the old building for 2 classes, and the school office on the 2nd floor. Since they had no use for the 3rd floor, they blocked it off from other student entries. The 3rd floor used to be upstairs dorm room, as the school back in the day was boarded at a house for girls. As you would expect, students could kind of rumors about what could be up there. Some of these claims were ridiculous, like the school hiding rotting corpses on the floorboards. Honestly, I just ignored most of the claims. Naturally, Chris and Mike were always curious about what was up there and constantly urged me to go up there with them. I, of course, constantly turned them down. Not out of fear, but out of concern from being suspended. However, through peer pressure, I finally decided to go up, and was the last mistake I would ever make. It was around December that my school would always hold an annual Christmas party. These parties went on quite late, with most of the teachers drinking themselves to the point of being totally oblivious. Of course, my friends took this as a perfect opportunity to sneak up on the 3rd floor of the school. Mike then once again asked me if I wanted to come. At first I said no, like I said at the time and time again. "Come on," Mike kept insisting. I sighed. Perhaps it would be a bit interesting. Plus the building was empty, which meant we wouldn't be caught. "Fine," I finally said. As I did, Mike's face lit up as he shouted, "Yes!" while patting me on the back. I felt a bit happy knowing my friends really wanted me to come with them. Mike went to get Chris, who basically would go anywhere Mike went. I followed them over to the campus, and I was as nervous as anyone could be. No, nervous would be a small way to put it. Petrified would be the better term. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Am I crazy? As I slowly moved next to Chris, he kept on telling me to calm down, but it was never that easy to me. I kept glancing over as we ran over the old complex, afraid that we might get caught. To be honest, part of me wanted to get caught. Looking back now, I wish we had been. Mike led us to the main hall of the school. The lights were turned off. No shock there. Mike fumbled until he found the light switch. As the lights went on, I could see the expression of excitement on his face. Wish I had the same feelings. Chris and I followed behind Mike to the 3rd floor staircase. I glanced up and saw the regular "Do Not Enter" sign that was stuck onto the rotting wood. I shrugged this off as best I could. Luckily for us, the wood wasn't high at all, an example of the school's cheap security. Mike slowly climbed up to the wood, motioning for us to follow him. Mike slowly climbed up over the wood, motioning us to follow him. At this point, my mind was screaming at me to run, so it was either stay or ditch your 2 friends. I sighed and slowly followed Chris as he climbed over the wood. I stepped on the staircase. The creaking from it unnerved me a bit, wondering if this floor was stable. Still, it was a minor concern. I followed Chris to the top of as Mike was already looking around. I reached the last step and glanced around the top floor. It was surprisingly very well preserved despite the dust and fading paint on the wall. It had very damp smell, which reminds me of dirty laundry. Mike started to drat around on the floor, eagerly looking for something interesting. Chris followed him like a puppy, typical behavior for him, but I slowly followed them into one of the dorm rooms. It was very dusty, with nothing but a worn-out bed in the center. I kept looking behind my back, half expecting someone to be there, but nothing. The shadows must be getting to me as I thought. We took a look at the other room, finding the same thing, one bed in each room. Nothing that special. I could see Mike getting really annoyed. Poor guy, I thought. I laughed in my head at myself about being afraid of this place. Turns out it was nothing but a damp, no ghosts or corpses, just an old floor. Mike gave up looking and began to make his way downstairs with Chris. I followed behind them slowly, still looking over my back. I will admit, I was still a bit nervous. I mean, this place was still eerie. As I reached the staircase, I heard a voice from below. I stepped back as I recognized the voice. It was the school janitor. He caught Mike and Chris climbing over the wood. I began to panic, not wanting to get caught, and I darted into one of the dorms. I quickly hid in the corner of one of the rooms, waiting for Chris and Mike to be escorted out. Some friend I am, I thought, feeling a bit guilty. I slumped into the floor and waited. It was quiet. The wood didn't even make a creak. The only light was the moonlight through the window. The silence began to bother me as I kept thinking that someone was waiting for me to get up. After the last 3 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore, so I jolted up and went into the hallway on the floor. As I moved to the staircase, I saw something catch my eye. I froze in place, not wanting to turn around, but I felt a cold feeling that I wasn't alone up here, that someone was behind me, and I kept telling myself to run, but I couldn't help but look. I regret everything I did at that moment. I turned around to find what appeared to be a girl at the end of the hall. She was spaced and had not noticed me. My mind was racing, trying to find out who that girl was and why she was up here. I began to step back, telling myself to run, and when I heard the floor creak beneath me, it made me jump at the same time, making the girl face me. I froze in place, and she looked at me. The girl looked at me so wide-eyed, as if her eyes were going to pop. Her eyes were black-colored. Her face looked dirty and slightly rotted as she wore a worn-out dress. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For that moment, I never took my eyes off her. I kept waiting for her to do something, but she stood there. She just stared at me for what felt like forever, and I needed to get out of there. I kept repeating myself to run, 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 run. I finally began to step backwards. As I did, the girl jerked and began to scream. My blood ran cold as I forced myself to run to the wooden barrier. To my horror, I could hear the scream getting louder. She was coming for me. I panicked, fumbling over the wood. I fell over the other side. Ignoring the pain, I made a dash for the main hall. I didn't dare turn around. I finally made it outside. Taking a second to catch my breath, I found Chris and Mike waiting for me. Mike asked me where I was in a rage, but I barely heard him. I was in shock. My heart was racing to the point where I collapsed on the ground. Mike and Chris asked me worriedly, what the hell happened? But I could never answer. After that night, I could never look up at that old school complex the same way. I always knew that girl was up there. You would have expected me to tell someone, but I never did. No one would believe me anyway. I still couldn't believe it. It had been 3 years and I finally graduated from school. Life is good. I've had no reason since that night to feel afraid of anything. That was until graduation day. After my graduation, I was leaving in my car parked near the old building. Not thinking about it, I looked up at the third floor window. I then stopped. Staring back at me through the dusty glass was a pair of wide, dark eyes.